This is the third episode of our 5-part Princess Chronicles decorating series. Today's cookies feature pastel yellow. I change up the style of the dress a bit, share with you some lessons I've learned the hard way, and attempt to create a recognizable princess dress. I'm back with my edible ink marker, and this round I'm attempting a new dress pattern. Taking inspiration from other cookie decorators with much more experience and talent than I have now, I've decided to try and up my game a little by not exactly following the pattern of the cookie. Even though I'm using the same flooding in sections technique, adding in this one extra section and reducing the space at the top of the dress challenges me a bit more than the ones I've done so far in the series. And speaking of dress patterns, let's talk about this cutter. I purchased this cutter from Chronicles as part of what appears to be a Beauty and the Beast bundle. Though it isn't marketed that way, probably so they don't get in trouble with Disney. A little later, I try my hand at coming close-ish to the bell design as shown on the web page. Since Cameraman has a 3D printer, I just purchased the STL files to print them myself. And let me tell you, if you have a 3D printer, this is the way to go. I only paid $8 for the whole set, and I can print one at a time, which is what I did here since I don't need all 4 right now. A word of caution though, if you do purchase Chronicles STL files, follow the advice listed on their FAQ page. Having previously printed cutters from Semi-Sweet Designs without any issues, neither Cameraman nor I took the advice seriously. Well, we learned our lesson. This is what the cutter is supposed to look like. And this is what happened when we didn't print with the proper adjustments. So I now have a useless cutter. Well, I guess it isn't really useless if it helps you not to make the same error. Since we're talking about errors, here's a good one. Although honestly, to this day, I don't even remember doing it. I must have been on autopilot. All plastic cutter sellers state the same hand wash only caution, and with good reason. Of course, as luck would have it, I killed a friend's cutters, not my own. This is what happens when you apparently throw your cutters into the dishwasher, and this is just from the hot water, as we don't even use the heating element in our dishwasher. The funniest part of this debacle is that it wasn't until weeks later that I happened to pull out her cutters and notice something was not quite right. So after I got a good chuckle out of my boneheadedness, I jumped online and ordered a new set from Semi-Sweet Designs. And that's how they got me as a customer. You can see here I'm starting to run out of the yellow icing. It turns out I completely misjudged exactly how much icing I was going to need to decorate just 5 cookies. I was trying to cut down on the amount I made because in the past I've always had way more icing than I needed. And let me tell you, it was not easy decorating with so little icing left in my bag. It was awkward, super uncomfortable, and really difficult to control the flow of the icing. You can see on these last 2 sections, the icing is all wobbly at the seam. I ran out of flood icings for each of the purple, yellow, and blue cookies. Luckily, I had more than enough piping consistency for the minimal details I was going to add. So I stopped mid-decorating and took some of the piping out of its bag, mixed it with a tiny bit of water, put it into a new piping bag, and voila! Crisis averted. Next time, I plan better. While we are on the subject of icing, this piping consistency was perfect. It was a little stiffer than the icing I used for the details on the purple and the white cookies in this series, which didn't hold up as well as I would have liked. If you want to see what I mean, the links to both of those episodes are down in the description. Getting just the right consistency for each application is definitely not something for the faint of heart. While I didn't quite get all of my piping consistencies, consistent, so far all of my flood icings have been really easy to work with. I haven't always had that luck. Actually, I'm really hoping it isn't luck. Maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to understand what a good flooding consistency is. I prepared these cookies using my super tasty, newly adapted, no spread sugar cookie recipe featuring caramel. They smelled like French toast. My husband walked in yesterday as I was making cookies and said, "It smells like an easy bake oven in here." I just looked it up online. They still sell those. This recipe appears to have an undetectable amount of spreading, or at least according to my eyes. After I bake my cookies, I immediately run a spatula over the top with a little pressure to encourage any puffy bits to settle flat. This at minimum gives me a nice surface to work with. It would be awful for the icing to slide because my cookie wasn't flat. After about 5 minutes, they get shifted to the cooling rack. I had a little leftover dough, so I started cutting hexagons for my upcoming Humblebee decorating series. The cookies stick to my Chewa cookie baking mat a little, so a bit of a nudge and a tiny lift gets these off the mat safely. You wouldn't think it would make much of a difference, but this little texture on the back of the cookies makes the eating experience so much more pleasant. Icing cookies like these is not for the decorator in a hurry. Admittedly, much of the time it takes me to decorate is due to my brand newness. I haven't yet figured out how to pick up the pace, but I am confident I'll eventually get there. Though in the video it looks like it took me about 5 minutes to decorate, this cookie actually took me a full 16 minutes from start to finish. Thankfully, I have the magic of editing at my fingertips. The first half, where I do all of the flooding, I've increased to 4 times the speed, and the details I add are running at double speed. Let's do the math on this. That's 16 minutes of actual decorating plus an additional 15 minutes for each of the 3 stages in the dehydrator, carry the 1. That makes this a 61-minute cookie. No wonder the original recording of all 5 of the yellow cookies I did was 1 hour and 40 minutes. So when you watch the experts decorate their cookies at their normal speed and then you try it and it takes you 3 times as long, don't be discouraged. I'm sure there are people who have taken to this kind of decorating like a duck takes to water, but I doubt that is the norm. And that certainly has not been my experience. And I know I sound like a broken record, but I just cannot stress enough that practice makes progress and progress propels. I look at these cookies and see something so much better than what I did at first. These are the very first cookies I ever tried to ice. As you can see, the decorating and the recording have vastly improved. Today, I am so much more confident in my abilities in both areas, and it helps me keep going. I think it looks neat here where you can see that the icing that has just lightly crusted over is a little darker than the wet icing. I conducted an experiment testing out this exact thing. I wanted to see how much of a difference there was between wet icing and dry. So in the episode, Royal Icing, Wet versus Dry, I did just that. I do think the setup of my experiment wasn't ideal to showcase this exactly, but now seeing it here, I think I'll try again and change the process of how I do it. I love it when ideas just show up on my doorstep. Here's the part where I try to make it look a little more like Belle's dress. I was going for a more uniform look for these scallops, but it turns out making them wasn't the easiest thing I've ever done. Though I do believe this is the first time I've ever tried making them. Normally, I pull up my icing bag a little bit while I'm piping, because in a longer stretch of cookie, it allows for more control over where the icing will land. But in these small areas, I actually have more control by having my tip very close to the cookie. Overall, I'm kinda okay with the look of them. I think their lack of uniformity actually provides the appearance of movement, which is consistent with the way I formed the pleats of the dress. Or at least pleats is what I'm calling them. I know they aren't technically pleats, but I have no idea what the correct term would be. I don't think they could be considered ruffles. So if you know of a better word, please let me know. I'm pretty happy with this little bit at the top of the dress. It's simple, but does achieve the basic look I had in my head. I'm always trying to balance decorating to the best of my ability while also trying to achieve the best possible viewing experience for you. So I would be grateful for any grace you would allow me for all of the times my hand takes up the whole cookie space, blocking what is going on underneath. If you look really closely, you might be able to tell that there is something very slightly off about my camera angle. That is the result of my setup actually recording this decorating upside down. I actually flipped the image 180 degrees in my editing program to make it look right side up. And also, please accept my apologies for having to swivel my cookies so much here. I try as much as I can to not swivel the cookies as I decorate, so you don't get sick from watching it. Anyone else here in the Gets Massively Motion Sick club? You may have even caught here and there that I sometimes use my scribe left-handed. I figure that's a win-win because it is really good for the brain to do things with your non-dominant hand, and I don't have to swivel the cookie. I do think these little blobby bits bring a bit more of a finished look to the dress. I'll be honest, the more I look at this cookie, the more I like it. I hope you will join me next time when I combine a couple of the new techniques I've used in this series and decorate these cookies in blue.
Next time on Kuny's Cookie Chronicles.
This is the 4th episode of our 5-part Princess Chronicles decorating series. Today features pastel blue. I walk you through how I flood cookies, try brush embroidery for the 2nd time, and give you a little look behind the scenes at Kuny's Cookies.